What we have is a community that's been promised a school for 5 years. The sod was turned, and now the school is delayed, and the figures that they were hoping it would come in at are 5 years old. We all know that the cost of things have escalated. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is the Minister still committed to building Rankin School, or will it be delayed indefinitely?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the department's intent to have a redesign ready so that there can be a tender call this fall.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transportation. Roads are as important in Cape Breton as they are anywhere else in Nova Scotia. The residents of the Cayley subdivision and Albert Bridge have sent numerous complaints about their roads to our caucus office. They are stuck in a bureaucratic limbo brought on by the forced amalgamation of the County of Cape Breton. These people are upset, confused, and angry. I will table one letter we received. The roads are in deplorable condition, and no matter who they ask for help, the response they receive is that no one knows who is responsible. What is the Minister going to do to help these residents?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I've had numerous letters myself and emails, etc., about Cayley subdivision. Cayley subdivision is a subdivision. They are J-class roads, and therefore the responsibility, I would suggest, lies primarily with the Cape Breton Regional Municipality.
Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While that may be right, that may be the right answer, but the CBRM is a cash-strapped municipality that had amalgamation forced upon them. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals rushed to amalgamation back in the 1990s, had many victims, not of least which were the J-class roads in Cape Breton. This lack of vision has hindered further development in rural Cape Breton.
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what we need here is a real flux of infrastructure capital in the Royal Cape Breton to solve this. Is this government willing to do so?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker,
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works has the floor.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the J-class road program that the provincial government brought in the year 2000, I believe it was the first year that this government came into power, is a good program, and it's equitable right across the province. It applies to all municipalities. And, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that Cape Breton Regional Municipality, if they decide that they want to get those roads paved, they know the process.
The Honourable Member of Cape Breton Nova on your final supplementary.
The people of Cayley subdivision are not alone. Many roads fell victim to the Liberals' forced amalgamation of these areas without the proper service of agreements and maintenance and infrastructure update. My question is to the Minister. When will you sit down with whatever counterparts on that side of the House you have to and come up with a solution to help these people?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I know that the Liberal government of the day brought about forced amalgamation, and shame on them. Shame on them. But don't blame Cayley Drive on this government, because we are prepared to pave it, providing the municipality will come forward and request that we pave it.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is also for the Minister of Transportation, Public Works. Mr. Speaker, the Scotch Lake Road and the McDonald Road is in shambles. The residents of Georges River and Scotch Lake have been demanding that something be done to the state of the roads for a long, long time. There's 31 homes on the McDonald Road, Mr. Speaker, and these people pay taxes like everyone else. So my question to the Minister is, when are these people going to get the service they are paying for and ensure their road is no longer neglected?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I know Georges River, but I don't know those two particular roads. I know the Georges River Road, and that's paved. These two roads, I take it, are gravel roads running off Georges River Road. And, Mr. Speaker, it's not the policy at the present time to pave gravel roads, except J-class roads. Mr. Speaker, we have instituted this particular policy simply because of the fact that it's to the advantage of all people in Nova Scotia to keep our present paved road system up to scratch. And if we divert money to paving unpaved roads, Mr. Speaker, we can't do that. I'd bring to the honourable member's attention, though, Mr. Speaker, I just may have 1 minute, that next year we will be starting a limited pilot program to pave some gravel roads, Mr. Speaker.
Now, member for Victoria Lakes on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind the honourable member that I quoted Mr. Burt McDonald on several occasions last week when we were talking in estimates on transportation. And Mr. Speaker, the McDonald Road, as Mr. McDonald has told me, in 1960, it was on the priority list. In 1980, it was guaranteed. I guess that was by Honest John, and he was in at some time or other, I guess, Mr. Speaker. Anyway, now, Mr. Speaker, they seem to create a class called a K-class road. Well, I think today we should create a new class called a Z-class road. That means nothing is ever going to be done with it, Mr. Speaker, because on a priority since 1960. Mr. Speaker, I know the minister says he's going to start a limited program. I guess it's on the priority list. What can we expect the minister to pave the road for the residents so they don't need to continue to suffer, Mr. Speaker?
Now, Mr. Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I may look pretty old, but I wasn't the minister back in 1960.
Order, please. Now, Mr. has the floor.
But however,
One more quick supplementary.
Thank you. but Mr. Speaker, I know where the honourable member is coming from. The roads in Cape Breton are no different than they are in any other part of Nova Scotia, and certainly we will do our best to catch up on those streets that need repaving, and we'll do so whenever we get an opportunity.
Y'all member Victoria Lakes on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's rather ironic that I used the analogy the other day when the Honourable Minister was telling us about the test vehicle.
Please. Y'all member Victoria Lakes has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said, it was ironic in estimates the other day when I used the analogy about the test vehicle that the department has, that in Cape Breton we have our own test vehicle, and it's these Ram Chargers that when the horns fall off the Ram, we know the road needs to be paved. And it's ironic, Mr. Speaker, that the Honourable Minister drives a Dodge Ram. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I would like a commitment from the Minister today that he would move the McDonald Road to a priority list, follow through, and make it one of the first ones that next year, when you do your program, that you pave that road, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister commit to that today?
Mr. Transportation Public Works.
Boy, there's a marvelous opportunity for an answer to that one, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we'll give it due consideration.
Thank you. Y'all member for Cape Breton Nova.
Jesus. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Community Services. The government's unfair treatment of people with intellectual disabilities in the need of housing continues, Mr. Speaker. Many communities do not have small options or group homes where these disabled adults can go to live. There is no community-based home in Port Hawkesbury, and the disabled people must go to Antigonish, Sydney, or New Glasgow if they need a place to live. I asked the Minister of Community Services, why have any intellectual disabled people in his area been left without a local place to live?
Mr. Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of interest, of course, in the Community Supports for Adults Renewal Initiative. And one of the things everybody could agree on is that we needed to do more for people, in particularly in the end of the spectrum, that needed some support, but perhaps not as much support as some of our clients. And that is why we launched the Direct Family Support Program. We're expanding the Supervised Apartment Program, and we are planning to introduce the Alternate Family Support Program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Y'all member Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, for several years now, the ROC Society in Port Hawkesbury has been trying to get approval to open a community-based options home to house local people with intellectual disabilities. They feel they are getting the runaround from this government and the Minister of Community Services. Meanwhile, the people they are advocating for continue to go without services. Right. I asked the Minister of Community Services, how much longer will the disabled in this area be shipped away from friends and family if they need a place to live?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And perhaps the honourable member is not aware, but there was a delegation that came down from Port Hawkesbury. It was arranged by their MLA, who was a very attentive gentleman, and my seatmate. And I had a very positive meeting with Tom Gunn and Billy Joe McLean, the mayor of Port Hawkesbury, and they seem to be very satisfied with the outcome of the meeting. I thank the member opposite for allowing me to share that with Nova Scotians. Sure.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova on your final supplementary.
I'm glad they had a positive meeting, but it doesn't put a roof over their heads. Mr. Speaker, because of the lack of group homes and small option homes in other surrounding areas such as Guysborough, the demand on existing services in Antigonish and New Glasgow is extremely high. People have to wait for years to access a bed in one of these residential facilities. I asked the Minister, when can these community members expect a straight answer on their proposal to provide a group home environment in Port Hawkesbury?
Now, Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would answer the member's question with a straight answer. They were given that answer a month ago, and I understand they were pleased with the answer.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as you're well aware, healthcare continues to be a major concern for the residents of Richmond County. Since the year 2000, I've risen in my place on each session to question the Minister on the Richmond Villa and the construction of a new facility. Mr. Speaker, the residents, the staff, and the community have had frustration, but at the same time have shown great patience in waiting for this much-anticipated facility. So my question today, this being 2005, can the Minister of Health tell us when his government will finally announce the awarding of the tender for the construction of the new Richmond Villa?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and indeed the time is drawing very near, Mr. Speaker, when we will be able to make that. And I want to thank my predecessor, the Minister of Education, for all of the wonderful spade work he did in the Richmond Villa project, because it was, as been suggested by the honourable member, it's been a long time coming to fruition. But I can tell the honourable member for Richmond that tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, we will make a public announcement as to the awarding of the contract and the beginning of the construction of the Richmond Villa. And I'm very pleased to make that announcement.
On your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it looks like we're on a roll, so let's see if we can keep going for the people of Richmond. Will the Minister tell us when we can expect a doctor for the closed emergency room at the Straight Richmond Hospital?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we indeed this week were part of the launch of a very important program, the CAP program, which my colleague, the Honourable Minister of Health Promotion, attended with Doctors Nova Scotia and the College of Physicians and Surgeons to launch that program. And that, Mr. Speaker, will provide many rural areas of this province with the opportunity to entice and recruit international medical graduates to their communities, Mr. Speaker. And I certainly hope that the honourable member for Richmond will be able to help convince one of those graduates to be able to stay in Richmond County and practice medicine, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm more than happy to continue to work with the recruitment committee, and hopefully the minister and his department will make the Straight Richmond one of the priorities for that. For getting a doctor to that. My final supplementary is, when can the good people of Richmond expect the minister to show up with his shovel for the sod turning of the new Richmond Villa?
Unfortunately, time allotted for question period has expired. Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources on an introduction.
To Mr. Speaker, and to you and all members of the House, I'd like to introduce in the East Gallery a personal friend of mine and a very dedicated and hard worker for the municipality of Clare, the Warden, Jean Melanson.
Order, please. Or government business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Could I have the concurrence of the House to revert back to the order of business introduction of bills?
Is it agreed? Agreed. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Environment Act.
The Honourable Member for Pictou East begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 1 of the Acts 1994-95, the Environment Act.
Bill 221, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Environment Act.
Or this bill be read a second time and future date. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call the order of business public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 203, the Involuntary Psychiatric Treatment Act?
Bill number 203, the Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to bring to the attention of the members of the legislature, and particularly Nova Scotians, who might be watching the debate of this particular bill. I want particularly those individuals who are...
Order, please. Order, please. And ask the honourable members to take their conversations outside, please. The honourable member Dartmouth North has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is extremely important, so I think it warrants some very serious discussion. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that when I left off on this bill, I was talking about what this bill does with respect to protecting those individuals who might be subject to involuntary psychiatric treatment. But I want to go back and I want to acknowledge the expertise that was provided by our critic of health, the Honourable Member for Halifax Needham. And she quite adequately articulated the very serious component of this bill, and that is around community treatment orders, and that is the whole very significant portion of this bill in which we need to recognize and we need to understand the significance of these community treatment orders. I also want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that was put in by the Honourable Member from Halifax, Shabukto, for providing us the legalese and the expertise around this piece of legislation. It is often that pieces of legislation come before this House that have a significant effect on individuals of our society. And we need to know that the legislation that's coming before this Legislative Assembly is legislation that does the right thing for the people of Nova Scotia, particularly if those individuals are vulnerable Nova Scotians. And this particular act, and all Nova Scotians should know, this act is dealing primarily with individuals whom have a mental health disorder. And I do recall the Honourable Member talking about his expertise primarily in the province of Ontario, working with civil libertarian Alan Borovoy, who worked very closely on mental health issues, guided, I believe, or had indicated that he had substantial involvement in crafting a piece of legislation in the Ontario legislature known as the Mental Health Act. And I do know that back then there was a tremendous effort to make sure that the pieces of legislation in the Mental Health Act of Ontario was in fact going to make sure that it protected those individual Ontarians of the day who needed to be protected. And again, this is a very serious piece of legislation because it calls into question the rights of those individuals. With the hour-long debate that both of those members of this Legislative Assembly has brought forward, Mr. Speaker, they have informed me, and I'm sure enlightened other members of this Legislative Assembly, on just exactly the components of this piece of legislation and why this piece of legislation needs to be discussed in this Legislative Assembly, and why it's important to look at sections of this legislation, bring it forward, dissect it, and make sure that when this piece of legislation crosses this legislative floor to the Red Room, that in fact there is legitimate reason why it requires the kind of debate it should rightfully have. I want to say that to the Minister of Health, spoke extremely briefly on this piece of legislation, although it was introduced by his government, and he had indicated that there were many Nova Scotians whom supported this piece of legislation. I would say that he had indicated there were many consumers of the mental health community who had supported this piece of legislation, and that they had consulted with some 200 groups. I want to say that the minister and his government have always indicated that consultation was a foundation by which his government was bringing legislation forward, and that his government believed that the very principle of consultation was significantly important, and that was the foundation of his government making the decisions that in fact would protect Nova Scotians. It's also, Mr. Speaker, and I would say to you and other members of this legislature, the important foundation of consultation, making sure that the right piece of legislation crosses this legislative floor and into the Red Room where public gets the opportunity to debate. I was a little startled and taken back by the third party in its comment that we were stalling this piece of legislation, and that somehow this piece of legislation was very good legislation and that it didn't warrant the debate, Mr. Speaker. I can say to you that there are two sides of every piece of legislation that comes through this legislative assembly. There are two different and often divergent views on legislation that crosses this floor. And that's the reason why we go through this process of bringing the bill through a procedure to this legislative assembly, discussing that piece of bill, and then forwarding it on, if required, not if required, but it must be required as part of the process, of going into the legislative Red Room and then open for debate. And that is when public consultation, unlike many other provinces across this country, is allowed to be taken place. And I would say to the honourable critic of the third party that it's important that Nova Scotians know that this is a piece of legislation that cannot be sped up, that it's important to debate this piece of legislation because it is not supported by all the mental health consumers out there in the community. And I do want to say that with respect to some of those individuals in the mental health community who may or have indicated to the government there is support for this piece of legislation, that I have sympathy for them and understand their very particular reason for wanting to push through quickly pieces of legislation. And I want to speak briefly with one group in particular, and I believe that this is supported by this organization, and it's called the Schizophrenia Society of Nova Scotia. And I know that they understand how difficult it is living with individuals who have mental health disorders who do not have the appropriate treatment and services provided to them by their governments. I do understand their frustration when a person with mental health disorders comes out of control or becomes out of control, and the family is at its wit's end and calls the government agencies and organizations to assist them and help them in addressing this issue. I also know, Mr. Speaker, that there are other organizations in this community who are watching very, very closely this piece of legislation and who may not support the piece of legislation primarily because of some of the components of this legislation. And I'd like to hear from them, Mr. Speaker, And that organization is the Canadian Mental Health Association. I have not, as a member of the Legislative Assembly, heard from those individuals and those organizations who are in place in Nova Scotia and in communities across this province as to how they view this piece of legislation that is before the House. As I've said, there's always two sides to an issue. But the significant, most important side of this legislature is to make sure that when legislation is crafted, that it is legislation that will stand the test of time, that it will protect the individuals whom this legislation was designed for, and that in fact this legislation will come with the services that are needed for those organizations and people in the community. I want to go back to the issue of protecting people's rights. It is so striking, I think, and significantly important that when you craft legislation, that the legislation must be seen to be protecting the rights of individuals. And I have to say in this particular case, Mr. Speaker, we as a political party have difficulty in wondering where the proper checks and balances might be with respect to delivering these community treatment orders. It is one thing to say that you are going to impose a community treatment order upon an individual and you don't provide the individuals with the rights. Now, under this piece of legislation, I do believe there had been some talk that the bill would enshrine within it the right for individuals to communicate or to consult with or to talk to advisors. Now, Mr. Speaker, that's a far cry from expertise. Who will be the advisors? We don't know who the advisors will be. We don't know what kind of expertise, what kind of training will be required by the advisors, whom in fact will be advising not only the individual who is subject to the involuntary psychiatric treatment, but also the member of the family or relative or caregiver who might be seeking that kind of advice as well. And we need to know, Mr. Speaker, if the advisor who will be advising the individuals, might even be caregivers, forgive me for saying that, because there are a number of caregivers who provide this caregiving service. And that is simply because members of the family have found it extremely difficult under the present services provided that what they do is they seek help in providing caregiving services outside their domain. And I think it's important to recognize and know that when the advisory service becomes available to the individuals, will it come accompanied with the training and the expertise that will be required. Then we need to know, Mr. Speaker, upon having the rights of the individual solely to an advisor, will this bill allow for legal consultation? And will there be legal advocacy available to the individuals who might require about their rights and how the involuntary psychiatric treatment certificate or the community treatment order came about? It's simply not good legislation. I say to you, members of government, you have to make sure that the rights of our most vulnerable in this province are, in all essence, protected. Because a single denial of a right of an individual through a piece of legislation can throw a whole wrench into the delivery of that treatment services that is provided. I had listened intently to my honourable member from Halifax, Shabaktu, who spoke once again on the legalese of this piece of legislation and wondered if, in fact, the language would be crafted within the community treatment orders that would stand the test of time. And I mean, will that stand the test of time around, Mr. Speaker, the Charter of Rights? Will it infringe upon the rights of individuals within the Charter to the fair and equitable treatment? And will it protect those individuals the right not only to have advisors on this special circumstance, but also to have the legal advocacy available to them when this comes forward? I think that what we need to recognize is that this piece of legislation, although there are agencies and organizations out there who might be championing this piece of legislation on behalf of the government, but I would say the reasons for them championing this piece of legislation is because it's solely out of frustration that government does not provide the expertise and the services available to mental health Nova Scotians. I should say, Mr. Speaker, to Nova Scotians who have mental health disorders, more appropriately put. I think that what we have to recognize and acknowledge that sometimes legislation is quickly crafted because a government might run on that in a platform. And they might say to a community that they will introduce this piece of legislation and not really give it the in-depth thought and study that it requires. The honourable member from Halifax, Needham, in her professional experiences has indicated and told us in our caucus and has told this legislative assembly all about the community treatment orders, the problems that surround the community treatment orders. You know, we know that when people might be endangering themselves or might be in danger to others, that the Hospital Act now gives that right to individuals to have that service, and that now there is a facility available to them. And now the individuals do have some sort of protection. Not the best in the world, and it's time for the Mental Health Act to be changed, and we know that. But we want a comprehensive piece of legislation that addresses mental health issues in this province. We just don't want one piece of legislation coming forward in a piecemeal manner to satisfy a government who might have run a political campaign on supporting or addressing one issue or component of mental health. It's far more important and it's far more significant to make sure that this piece of legislation is the kind of legislation that will meet the test of time. I say to you that the important thing here is around qualifications. Who is going to be qualified to administer these programs? And who is going to be qualified to administer the community treatment orders? Who is going to oversee that? We don't see that in the piece of legislation. We need to have a comfort level. And so do Nova Scotians out there with mental health disorders who are often, in some cases, left on their own simply because there is no government department to address the issue of mental health disorders. And I don't mean that this should be a standalone ministry, Mr. Speaker, but I do mean that it can be a component of the Department of Health, which it rightfully is, and that in fact the proper qualified individuals are in there who can convince the government that their piece of legislation is right. And I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, that that's my concern when I listen to the honourable member from Glace Bay, who happens to be the health critic for the third party, offer some criticism with respect to our position in this legislature on how we were talking about this piece of legislation. He said that it was supported by the community wanted this piece of legislation, and we were just stalling a good piece of legislation going through this legislative chamber. Mr. Speaker, I would say to you that I have listened to that honorable member and other members of his party debate pieces of legislation that we may have considered, or I shouldn't say we, but I might have considered was not, or did not warrant the kind of debate in this legislature. But nonetheless, I had never implied that in fact legislation that comes before this legislature should never be openly and seriously discussed. I want to say that if we do that, then we as a government are asking for a whole host of problems, because we as a government here in Nova Scotia, and I believe we're somewhat different than other governments across the province, that the members of the public can come and speak before the bills while they're at law amendments. Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that that's why law amendments is there. And that is the reason why we can hear from those proponents who support this piece of legislation, and why we can hear from those proponents who are opposed to this piece of legislation. And I want to say that as a member of this Legislative Assembly, I have listened to the Minister of Health and his presentation to this bill, Mr. Speaker. I have listened to the opposition in their position on this bill, 203, and I have listened to the members of my caucus who have spoken prior to myself on this piece of legislation that has come before the legislature. I know that it's a difficult piece of legislation, and it's an extremely complex piece of legislation. I, for one, would like to see this legislation at least have the kind of community debate that it rightfully should have. So at this point in time, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a motion to move adjournment of debate on Bill 203, an act respecting involuntary psychiatric treatment.
Motion is to adjourn debate on Bill number 203. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of the Honourable Deputy Premier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill 219?
Bill number 219. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to move second reading of Bill 219, an act to amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes of Nova Scotia 1989, the Trade Union Act. First of all, I'd like to start by congratulating the government for having the foresight to bring this bill forward today, and to see to it that it will move on through to the Law Amendments Committee. And it essentially has two pieces to it. One, it has to do with expedited arbitration. Mr. Speaker, very simply, it just provides a process whereby disputes can be concluded in a fashion that is more acceptable to, I think, all parties to the dispute. It provides that they will be addressed in a reasonable time frame, so that the parties can, in fact, get on with the business that they're involved in, which, of course, is the employment and the administration of the workplace, Mr. Speaker. So this is sometimes referred to as rapid-fire arbitration. It's a mechanism that already exists in other jurisdictions around the country, and it's basically just a good piece of legislation that will help will really help not just workers, but also will help businesses. It means that these things will be concluded in a more timely fashion, and I'm very pleased that the government will be bringing this forward. I might point out it applies only under Part 1 of the Trade Union Act, and the reason for that is that I believe that, in fact, the expedited arbitration, in fact, already exists under Part 2. So, in that regard, it deals with something that was, in some senses, just missing from the Act. The second part is something called the duty of fair representation. Mr. Speaker, again, that is something that I think is quite valuable to members of a union. It essentially provides that if a member of a trade union should have a dispute with his own or her own union, that there is a mechanism to deal with that dispute. And currently, as the members might know, there is no mechanism to have that happen. So this is, again, a common sense piece of legislation that exists in many other jurisdictions across the country. And I must say, and I will say again, that I'm very pleased that the government saw it worthwhile to bring forward this piece of legislation at this time. And I think in the long run, if we can get through the consultation process and we can hear from people and these come into law, that in fact our province will be better off, and the people who fall under the jurisdiction of that act, both employers and employees, will be ultimately the better off for it. So, Mr. Speaker, with those very brief comments, I would like to move second reading of Bill 219.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to... Yeah, I'm going to speak in the bill just for a little bit. Okay. I'm pleased to rise
Labour
today,
on Bill number 219.
Thank you, to discuss two important labour relations issues that have been addressed in the opposition Bill 219. And I'll begin by discussing expedited arbitration and then move on to the duty of fair representation. And Mr. Speaker, effective arbitration is an important issue for all labour management parties, and we're pleased to consider the bill and to discuss the merits of an expedited arbitration option being added to Part 1 of the Trade Union Act. Expedited arbitration is a mechanism to resolve disputes, commonly known as grievances, and the system is designed to reduce delays by moving matters to a hearing and by issuing a timely and binding award. And in some cases, expedited arbitration may also reduce costs. Currently, under the Trade Union Act, only the construction industry can avail itself of the expedited arbitration option. If enacted, the expedited arbitration would apply to everyone. The details of the process would be different for the two sectors, recognize the particular need for urgency in the construction sector. And if expedited arbitration becomes an option under Part 1 of the Trade Union Act, the time frame for getting a rights dispute resolved could drop by weeks and possibly even months, Mr. Speaker. At the same time, it's important that a balance is struck between the value to the parties of quicker resolution and their mutual interest in a decision-making process that is fair. Mr. Speaker, labor arbitrators decide and resolve important and often very complex issues, and sometimes this will involve issues such as human rights and constitutional matters. The labor arbitrators need to do so in a way that allows both parties a full opportunity to address the complexity of the issues and to feel that at the end of the process they were truly heard. Mr. Speaker, it's important that the arbitration process work well for both public and private sectors, unions, and management. And we need to understand more about this situation before we could consider the legislation. We need to know what Nova Scotians think about the bill. We need to consider the resource implications of expedited arbitration. Mr. Speaker, we certainly look forward to hearing from my colleagues and from stakeholders during the law amendments process. I'd like to turn my attention to the second main issue raised in the bill, and that's the duty of fair representation. Currently, there's no duty of fair representation contained within Part 1 of the Trade Union Act. However, employees do have the right to challenge their union representatives through an internal process set out on their Constitution and bylaws. And in addition, they can bring a legal action against their union in the civil court system. Certainly, Mr. Speaker, the government is willing to consider the duty of fair representation in the Trade Union Act, provided the statutory process is crafted to mitigate the very significant administrative implications and resource issues. It's also important that the process be a fair one to all concerned, including the employers. Mr. Speaker, the addition of a duty of fair representation will significantly increase both the volume of cases and the operating costs for the Labor Relations Board based on the comparative research data that we currently have. As well, these amendments would also have implications under the Highway Workers Collective Bargaining Act, the Civil Services Collective Bargaining Act, and the Corrections Act, which will all have to be considered. Both of these issues will have to be taken into account if we decide to enact this bill. And as well, Mr. Speaker, if the bill proceeds, the process should address issues that other jurisdictions have identified as being problematic. It's important to note that jurisdictions have consistently reported that a minimum number of these complaints are ultimately successful. So, Mr. Speaker, we will carefully consider these amendments that the opposition's brought forward. Certainly interested in what my colleagues have to say about the amendments, and I'm very interested in what stakeholders feel as well. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to be able to stand and say a few words on the bill at this time.
Recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition to close debate on Bill 219. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise to close debate on this bill, and I look forward to the hearings before law amendments.
Motion is for second reading of Bill number 219. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 219, title and act to amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Trade Union Act.
Or this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 212?
Bill number 212. The Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. And I'm extremely pleased today to be able to stand to speak to move the second reading of Bill number 212. I'd like to thank all members of this legislature who have shown their interest in seeing this move forward for the comments of the public, because as I've said before, I believe this is an extremely important issue for the people of Nova Scotia. This bill has two essential functions. One of them is to ensure continuity of health insurance protection for Nova Scotians who are having to leave group insurance programs, and the other is to ensure that pre-existing conditions are to some degree limited within a lifetime. So I realize that this is a complex subject, and because of this I will be very brief indeed and look forward to the comments of members of the public and of the legislature. And I'd like to close debate at this point and move second reading of Bill 212. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Motion is for second reading of 212. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 212, entitled an act respecting the protection and portability of health insurance.
Or this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 169?
Bill number 169. The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand to move second reading on Bill 169, an act to amend Chapter 3 of the Acts 1994-95, the Farm Registration Act. As I'm sure many of you know, remember last fall this Farm Registration Act was before the House, and we did some housekeeping amendments to that bill. And one of the loopholes that we felt, and that I think the industry has been feeling over a number of times, is the fact that when it comes to the registration of farms and farms being able to register with the department and then in turn ask for a rebate and ask for their registration fee back, there's been a flaw in that in respect to the fact that that is the only way the Federation is able to fund itself. And I think that's extremely important, Mr. Speaker, because that funding is outside of government. It's the industry funding itself, and it's a way for them to lobby and promote agriculture in Nova Scotia. The changes that are in this bill is that 8, 4A and 4B would be removed. That would take away the clause, and so farmers would not be entitled to ask for a refund for the registration fee. I think this is critically important. As I said earlier, it gives the Federation an opportunity to be able to fund themselves and lobby on behalf of the industry. As all of you know, agriculture is critical to the rural economy of this province and the entire economy. And with this lobby and with them out there promoting not only certain sectors but the entire sectors of agriculture, Mr. Speaker, I think this is a first step. This is a first step in being able to reform the agricultural industry in the province of Nova Scotia. So with that, I'll move second reading on this bill.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to say a couple of words on this one. Yes, this has been asked for by the Federation for a very long time. Trying to fix up this loophole. Quite honestly, the loophole was there to allow folks that didn't believe in the Federation, didn't believe of belonging to such an institution, to give them opportunity to opt out. And it's exactly what it was for, and that they would be able to get their funding back. This, in effect, makes them responsible to pay their dues. Of course, farm registration is important for farmers in order to access the funding through our department, that you do need to be a registered farm, so that's sort of the impetus to register your farm. But what also will be happening here is that we will be pushing for an amendment in the committee to make sure that people can opt out. The funding, of course, will continue on to the Federation, but the member or the farmer has that opportunity to say, I don't want to participate in the Federation, and his information or her information will not flow through to the Federation. So I want to thank the member opposite for bringing this forward, and I hope that the farm community will accept it in its entirety.
You recognize the Honourable Member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to stand and make a few comments on this piece of legislation. I want to congratulate the member from Annapolis. This was a job well done, I think, and it's one that actually I think it was the Agricultural Administration Act last fall that we were dealing with, and farm registration was part of that act. And I think the member from Annapolis and I both told the minister that we would support this movement, and had been told that it was in that act, and it never showed up. But and I think that it is very important that the Federation is able to obtain funding that allows it to do the work that it needs to do, allows it to be a voice for the agricultural community, not connected to government. And if it turns out that that the province is funding the Federation, and then it'd be the criticism of being beholden to the government. And I would say that recent history would indicate that the Federation has had a pretty rough ride, actually, at the hands of this administration. So I'm pleased that the minister and the government are supportive of this, and that the hurdle that they encountered has been overcome. And I look forward to seeing this bill move through the House, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member for Annapolis to close debate on Bill number 169. The member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member from Hants East for his comments, and not only that, for the dedication that he has shown to the agricultural industry since being elected to the legislature. I also want to acknowledge the minister, who has, quite frankly, been given a tough job when he was first elected to be Minister of Agriculture, and I think has shown to the industry his compassion and caring for the industry itself. And I respect the amendments that may come forward as we move this bill forward, so I close debate on Bill 169.
Motion to second reading of Bill number 169. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion's carried.
Bill 169, title and act to amend Chapter 3 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Farm Registration Act.
Or this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 181?
Bill number 181, the Occupational Health and Safety Act. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the government for allowing this bill to be read for a second time here today. Bill 181, Mr. Speaker, was introduced to address a serious and growing problem in the workplace. The problem, Mr. Speaker, is employees being bullied by other employees or by their employer. We all know what bullying is. It can be physical or psychological, or it can be overt or subtle. Regardless of its form, it does exist and needs to be addressed because many people don't know how to handle it. The bill would require employers to institute a workplace bullying program with or without government guidelines, but it also enables the government to create guidelines that an employer must follow in creating a bullying prevention program. And I will say that it enables the government to do it. It doesn't insist that the government do it. It enables the government if they feel it necessary. The concern is real, Mr. Speaker. We hear the concerns of employees on a regular basis. Workers often feel helpless to do anything about it. Current mechanisms to deal with the bullying, such as grievance procedures, arbitration, are often slow and blunt tools and are not always the most efficient way to deal with the problem. And they don't often deal with prevention, Mr. Speaker. What could a workplace bullying prevention program look like? It could encompass warning signs, complaint protocol, possible solutions, and mechanisms to ensure the problem is appropriately dealt with. The main issue, Mr. Speaker, is that employers who may not have the foggiest idea that bullying is an issue, they'll now have to turn their minds to it and have a program in place. Steps will be required to prevent the problem from occurring in the first place. And with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I would move second reading.
Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will not be speaking long. I will say on the outset that I support this bill going through. It's a good bill. It's I believe, a very small step, though, towards the real problem, and that's violence in the workplace regulations to go forward. And I would ask government to start looking at those seriously. This is in no small way associated with violence in the workplace, because those types of incidents, such as bullying, as the member from Cape Breton South brought forward, are the things that escalate into violence in the workplace, whether it's a worker against a worker, or maybe someone in a management position with somebody lower, Mr. Speaker. So these are the type of things that we need to send a message out. It is enabling legislation, certainly is one that says that, you know, workers in the workplace are respected and you have to respect one another. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I'll take my place and look forward to see this bill going forward.
Recognized honourable member for Cape Breton South be to close debate on bill number 181. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading.
Questions for second reading of bill number 181. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion's carried.
Bill 181, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 7 of the Acts of 1996, the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
Or this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call the order of business private and local bills for second reading?
Private local bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call bill number 216?
Bill number 216, the Beachville Baptist Church Act. The honourable member for Preston.
Yes, this is I'd like to move the reading of Bill 216. It's a very important bill to the community of Beachville and their right to exercise the traditional religious ceremonies that they've had in the community for generations. And with that, I'd move reading of the bill. Second reading.
Motion is for second reading of bill number 216. The House ready for the question? Oh. Order, please. Order, please. Sorry. The honourable member Timberley Prospect.
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. And I understand as things are being expedited today for various reasons, this is a community that, let me tell you, I can speak at great length on. And I want to celebrate, for example, March 24th, 1998 of this was a great day for me, and on that particular evening, I know we were elected. But on March 24th of this year, my wife and I had to put our usual celebration of that event off, because on March 24th, I had the opportunity to attend a community meeting in the Beachville Church. And let me tell you, here's a community of historic roots, and on that particular evening, aside from the fact that I had to put up with Cecil Wright and his comments about the Boston Bruins. And it was like a high school reunion as I saw all these wonderful young men and women who've come back to the community to reinvigorate historic Beachville. Carol Ann Wright, Curtis Jarvis, Blaine Hamilton. It was a wonderful event to attend because it was at that particular event where it was really put to all of us that Beachville was a community that had a bright future and had a great past. And I know the member from Preston in this very, very well-intentioned bill will certainly have our support because this community and its historic roots has been under attack from developers as they continue to pursue developments around and in the community of Beachville. And the people of this historic community, they want the opportunity to be consulted. They want the opportunity to be listened to. And there's many people that I can congratulate for their energy and their commitment. I want to particularly recognize Reverend Clarence Armstrong. Anyone present wants to attend a wonderful church service where you will begin to actually feel the religion. I urge you to attend a ceremony at the Beachville Baptist Church. Clarence Armstrong delivers the message, and he delivers it in a fashion, let me tell you, that is invigorating, exciting, and involves all present. And of course, one can tell you one of the greatest events that I've had in the Beachville Church, and I think the speaker would agree with me in this particular event. Maybe the speaker isn't aware of the fact, but I'm not the greatest singer in the world. And I know that maybe some members opposite have heard me on occasion try to carry a tune. But let me tell you, when I attend the Beachville Baptist Church, I have to participate in the singing of the wonderful songs that are brought forward by Reverend Clarence Armstrong. And it is an event, let me tell you. It is an event. It is an engaging, powerful event. And I want you to know, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to take up the offer that has been made here. I want you to know that when those particular days, when I have the chance to also point out to members opposite the importance of attending events in the historic community of Beachville. It's a community that, let me tell you, it's always a privilege to go into the Monroe subdivision, to knock on the doors along the main road and the St. Margaret's Bay Road, to drop in to see the Wrights or the Hamiltons or the Jarvises, because the reception that you receive as a politician is always very positive. They believe that we have something we can help them with this particular piece of legislation. It's a piece of legislation that has the support of the NDP. It's a piece of legislation that we're looking forward to supporting as it moves through to the next stage. And it's a piece of legislation that will allow the historic community of Beachville and its church to celebrate the baptism in the traditional way that it is done in that community for so many wonderful years. And I would be remiss if I didn't go back to pointing out to you that the other day that in our house at that time were a number of prominent citizens of Beachville. And you know, when you see a young woman like Carol Ann Wright Parks stand in front of a TV camera and speak with such passion about her community and her church and her family, you begin to realize how fortunate you were as a teacher to be able to say, well, maybe just a little bit I had something to do with where Carol Ann Wright Parks is today. It's a valuable lesson for all of us. In spite of Cecil Wright's comments about my choice of hockey teams or his choice of baseball teams, let me tell you, I'm proud to say that I represent the community of Beachville. I'm proud to endorse this piece of legislation, and I look forward to the support of the other members of the House on this particular bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member for Preston to close debate on 216. The member for Preston.
I move the bill be read a second time.
Motion is for second reading of Bill number 216. House ready for the question. All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 216 entitled An Act to Ensure a Right-of-Way for the Beachville Baptist Church to Lovett Lake for Baptisms.
Or this bill be referred to the Committee on Private and Local Bills. The Honorable Deputy Premier.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker,
order, please.
could I have
Government House Leader.
Could I have the concurrence of the House to revert to the order of business, tabling reports of committees.
Is it agreed? Agreed. Table reports of committees. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Chairman of the Committee on Law Amendments, I am directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bill. Bill number 79, an act respecting the price of petroleum products. The committee recommends this bill to the favorable consideration of the House with certain amendments. And Mr. Speaker, I also would mention that it's the intention to call the committee, the Law Amendments Committee, back to consider a bill that has just received second reading for members of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order this bill refer to the Committee on the Whole House on Bills. The Honourable Deputy Government House Leader. I'm sorry, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve the Committee of the Whole House on Bills.
Agreed?
Agreed.
You need that? Just don't want to cover up the names. Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the committee. Would you please call Bill number 162, the Public Utilities Act?
Bill number 162, the Public Utilities Act. Question has been called. Should they be? Do the clauses carry as amended? They're carried. Does the title carry? Carried. Does the bill carry? Carried. It is carried. Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call the order of Bill number 174, the Order to General Act? And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for the page to distribute the amended changes as made in the Law Amendments Committee.
Bill number 174, the Auditor General's Act. And the amendments are being passed out. The Honourable Government House Leader.
You're the best looking page in here.
We'll just wait a moment while the amendments are being passed out. Do the clauses as amended carry? Does the title carry? So the preference is clause by clause? I don't have the amendment.
It was unamended in law amendments. No amendments out there. Okay. These are being proposed. So these are proposed amendments.
Clause 1, There's no changes. Is Clause 1 carried? Carried. Clauses 2, 3, and 4 are added. They are new ones. Clause 2. Is it carried as amended? The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
I don't mean to be a stickler too much for procedure, Mr. Chair, but I mean, it looks like these aren't new clauses. It looks like it's an amendment to clause section 15, section 16, section 21, and there's three separate. You're striking out the words management board and substituting treasury and policy board. Those are clauses not in there right now. So you're adding three clauses. Okay, so I'm not sure if the government House Leader wants to move that as one amendment. That's fine, but I would prefer we actually have a motion to amend.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
The change from management board, which was back about 20 years ago, and to Treasury and Policy Board, the present sub-department that we have. And in section 15 of chapter 28, we strike out the word management board. We strike out the two words management board in the third line and substitute Treasury and Policy Board, and I so move.
The question has been called. Shall the section 15 clause 2 carry as amended? Carried. Shall clause 3 carry? Carried. Shall clause 4 as amended carry? Clauses 5 and 6 are the old clauses. Okay. Okay, shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 177, the Financial Measures 2005 Act?
Bill number 177, the Financial Measures 2005 Act. Question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 179, the Self-Managed Support Care Act?
Bill number 179, the Self-Managed Support Care Act. Question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Bill 180, Municipal Government Act.
Bill number 180, Municipal Governments Act. Question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 191, the Municipal Law Amendment 2005 Act?
Bill number 191, the Municipal Law Amendments 2005 Act. Question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 192, the Alexander Graham Bell Day Act?
Bill number 192, the Alexander Graham Bell Day Act. Question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I'll recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 197, the Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act?
Bill number 197, the Fishery and Coastal Resources Act. The question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I'll recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 198, the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission Act?
Bill number 198, the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission Act. Question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill is carried. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 202, the Children and Family Services Act?
Bill number 202, the Children and Family Services Act.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, I'll recognize the Honorable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Chair, I just want to acknowledge both opposition parties, and particularly their critics, for their support in this. The Liberal critic was supportive right from the start, and I appreciated his party's position. The NDP critic had some legitimate concerns, and by virtue of her friendly intervention, she made it a better bill. So I want to thank both parties for their assistance in bringing this forward.
Question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. Recognize the Honorable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill 205, the Securities Act?
Bill number 205, the Securities Act. Question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 206, the Camp Hill Foundation Act?
Bill number 206, the Camp Hill Foundations Act. The question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I'll recognize the Honorable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill 207, the Provincial Finance Act?
Bill number 207, the Provincial Finance Act. The question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I'll recognize the Honorable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill 208, the Workers' Compensation Act?
Bill number 208, the Workers' Compensation Act. The question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I'll recognize the Honorable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill 210, the Health Authorities Act?
Bill number 210, the Health Authorities Act. Question's been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. Am I supposed to say that?
Please call Bill number 79.
Bill number 79, Petroleums Act. The question has been called. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. The Honorable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move the committee to now rise and report these bills. That other bill is in the back.
Chairman of the Committee, whole House and Bills reports.
The committee has met and considered several bills, and the chairman has been instructed to recommend them to the favorable consideration of the House, all without amendment except for Bill 174 with certain amendments. And the bills numbers are 162, 174 as aforesaid, 177, 179, 180, 191, 192, 197, 198, 202, 205, 206, 207, 208, 210, and Bill 79.
When should these bills be read for the third time? Agreed? Honorable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Speaker, would you please call the order of business public bills for third reading?
Public bills for third reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 153, the Public Service Act?
Bill number 153, the Public Service Act. The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
I'd like to move a third reading, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Cole-Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't get a chance to speak on this in second reading because of some of my opposition House Leader duties. So I want to take just a couple of minutes on third reading. This bill enables the development of an Office of Immigration, which anyone in this province would say is a good idea. I would actually suggest that a department would have been better. Would have been nice to have a few more bodies, a little more investment of money to make sure that we could actually have legislation, have a department, a full department that is actually going to do and promote this province with immigrants so we can get and retain and keep more immigrants in this province. Unfortunately, we are not at that stage, I guess, mainly because this government has created a privatized form of a nominee program that I have consistently condemned as one that I think is a scheme that will, in the end, even though this government is not paying a dime for its nominee program now, will cost this province a lot in the years to come, Mr. Speaker. And we can pass all the legislation we want to create an Office of Immigration, but as long as this government is willing to sacrifice the future of this province by allowing the privatization of its nominee program for a company that's using it as a venture capital scheme, I would suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, the future doesn't look so bright for immigrants in this province. Thank you.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 153. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 153, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 376 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Service Act, to establish the Office of Immigration.
Order the bill to pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 168, the Securities Act?
Bill number 168, the Securities Act. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour, I move third reading of Bill number 168, the Securities Act.
Question was called on third. Motion is for third reading of Bill number 168, Securities Act. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 168, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 418 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Securities Act.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 173, the Bee Industry Act?
Bill number 173, the Honourable Minister, the Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading of Bill number 173, the Bee Industry Act.
The Honourable Member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to have a few minutes to speak, a couple of minutes to speak on this act. The industry has been keen to see this legislation get through the House. I think that. Like so many things that happen in a world outside this legislature, there are those occurrences that affect people's lives in a very real way, and in particular when it affects people's lives in a monetary way, they'd like to see some action. And this legislation for a registry of beekeepers, number one, is very important. And the thrust of this is for the control of disease as much as it is for anything else. There are a couple of diseases, Mr. Speaker, European and American foul brood, which affects young bees, and varroa mite, which is a parasite that bees contract. It's, I think for the industry, they want to know that when somebody is going to import bees, that they actually have to get a permit to do that. This will identify those areas that are identified with diseases. In particular, there's very few drugs that will work on some of these conditions, and in some areas, the bee colonies there have developed resistance. And I think New Brunswick is one of those areas, Alberta is one, and part of Ontario is the other. And so these would be areas that keepers would be interested to know about. And when they're importing queens in particular, Mr. Speaker, this is actually, I think, the bee that's most often imported, because queens are necessary to set up new colonies. About $21 for a queen bee. A whole hive is worth about $300, and beekeepers don't want to be losing their investment. And depending on the number of hives they want to make up in the spring of the year, in particular, because they would use whatever of their bee colonies survive the winter, to use those queens to hive off some of those bees and to set up new colonies. So, Mr. Speaker, for them, whether large or small, this investment is an important one to them, and they want to have some assurance that they're going to be able to have good, healthy bees brought into the province, and in particular, Mr. Speaker, even if some of these beekeepers are not importing, they want to know that their neighbors or beekeepers in the surrounding area or beekeepers in the province, period, who are importing are going to bring in good, healthy bees that will not impact their business. And I think for all those who actually hire beekeepers to put hives in whatever crop it is that they're trying to produce, and we have to say for flowering crops, blueberries being the largest horticultural product in this province, so pollination, a good rate of pollination is important for blueberry producers, and along with, there's a number of other complications, you might say, that all farmers face, but certainly late frosts and drought are two conditions that impact the volume of the crop, and so they don't want to throw something else into this mix that would impact the ability to get a good crop in 1 year, and so pollination and good pollination is very important to them, and they make a lot of use of bees, and actually without pollination you're not going to have any fruit produced. And I think that by and large, most farmers have kind of given up the notion that natural pollination would be enough, that there are enough bees to do pollination. And I think maybe, I'll throw my environmental side into this. That this is an area that perhaps, members should think about when it comes to the use of pesticides and the impact on the natural bee population that may actually be resulting in a greater need for imported bees and beekeepers. So we're very pleased to see this legislation move through third reading, Mr. Speaker, and are quite supportive for the legislation and for the industry. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Merci beaucoup. J'aimerais vous prendre votre attention à un groupe qui est dans notre galerie au moment. C'est une bande d'élèves de l'Étoile de l'Acadie à Sydney qui viennent ici pour les Jeux d'Acadie qui vont prendre place à Dartmouth. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring your attention to the East Gallery. There are a bunch of students from l'Étoile de l'Acadie that are here in Halifax and Dartmouth for the Jeux d'Acadie that are happening this weekend. Of course, l'Étoile de l'Acadie is in the good riding of Cape Breton Nova, and that's why our member is sitting next to me and not in his usual place over there. I'm sure he's feeling a little uneasy being here. But I would ask the group, s'il vous plaît, vous lever et recevoir la grande merci.
Thank you. We certainly welcome our guest to gallery today, the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, on Bill number 173.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to close third reading on Bill 173.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 173. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Counter-minded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 173, an act respecting the bee industry.
Or the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 162, the Public Utilities Act.
Bill number 162, the Honourable Minister of Energy.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move third reading of Bill 162, the Public Utilities Act.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 162. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Counter-minded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 162, an act to amend Chapter 380 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Utilities Act.
Or the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 197, the Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act.
Bill number 197, the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading of Bill number 197.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, just for the record, I have expressed some concern when this bill was first introduced. I did so again at law amendments. For the record, there was no representations at all at law amendments on this bill from either fishermen, fishery organizations, or members of the general community that may have wished to make input on this. I have raised concerns with the minister, and I've even spoken with some of his staff, who I know also have reservations about this bill and whether it actually will achieve anything in addressing some of the concerns that exist in the fishing community. The prices of fishing licenses and fishing enterprise now are beyond the financial means of most Nova Scotians living in rural communities. The tradition of deckhands or family members who've been able to purchase fishing licenses has become to the point now that it's cost prohibitive. We do need to have a review of our Fisheries Loan Board, which up to date has refused any sort of financial assistance for buying of fishing licenses. We all know that our private banks do not allow for any sort of financing for fishing licenses, and so it's a debate that I certainly hope that this bill is not going to push that debate aside in the belief that something has been achieved to address those most serious questions. So I do want to reiterate again, having had experience with trust agreements, it's important that we know that many of these are amongst family members. They are not all between individuals and private corporations, as some would have led us to believe. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, coming from a fishing community and knowing and a fishing family myself, I can certainly attest to how fishermen are private about their livelihood, about their catches, about their income, about their success, or about their lack of success. And I certainly question just how many in the fishing community will embrace the thought that the agreements that they may have in place will now be made public, because I'm not quite sure of how many other resource-based industries are required to make any sort of commercial agreements that they have public as well. So I wanted just to put those concerns on the record. Again, it's still not clear as to how this could possibly even be enforced. I know I certainly, as it now stands, wouldn't encourage anyone to register, because there's really no sort of requirement to do so. So, Mr. Speaker, with those comments, I do hope that this House and this government will have a comprehensive debate about the future of the fishery here in Nova Scotia and the future of the survival of our many rural communities and coastal communities that rely so heavily on the fishery. I do not believe that Bill 197 is going to take much of a step in addressing some of those concerns I've raised. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition to close debate on Bill number 197.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand the reservations of the member with respect to this matter. I think all of this has been adequately canvassed, and I'm pleased to see that this is moving forward, and I'd like to close debate.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 197. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried.
97, an act to amend Chapter 25 of the Acts of 1996, the Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act.
Or the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill 207, the Provincial Finance Act?
Bill number 207, the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise and speak for just a few seconds on this bill and to move it and to move third reading. Mr. Speaker, I think the importance of this act grows as we near the confidence vote that's coming this afternoon in the House of Commons, the budget vote that's there, and the vote on the amendments to the bill, Bill C-48, which is actually the bill that is credited with the large investment of money that's going to take place in post-secondary education. And I wanted to make this point in respect to it. The amendments that exist in Bill C-48 with respect to post-secondary education will represent the largest single investment in post-secondary education since Tommy Douglas forced the Pearson minority government to introduce the Canada Student Loan Program. Mr. Speaker, that is how significant this investment is going to be in post-secondary education. It's going to mean, Mr. Speaker, this bill is going to mean that money is going to flow through to the young people of our province and indeed to the young people of the nation. And it's going to flow through in tangible ways. It's going to reduce tuition, Mr. Speaker. It is going to go into needs-based grants. It's going to go into apprenticeship training. Now, how much more important could it be than preparing the young people of our province and our nation to prosper? How much better could a piece of legislation be than to engage in a process where the money that's going to be spent is actually going to make the foundation of our province stronger?
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, this is, I think, a great statement of principle in this particular legislation, and should the budget be fortunate enough to pass this evening in the House of Commons, many untold number of students in this province will be better off. And I'm proud to have had play my part in bringing this forward. I'm pleased that the government agreed to bring it forward at this time as well, and I would move third reading.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, very briefly, we certainly have indicated our support for this bill, and one of the what I find most unfortunate is that we are still in this House questioning whether the federal budget is going to pass. And when we think of the advantages that there are for Nova Scotians, the Leader of the Opposition has spoken about students and universities and higher learning, but we all know the advantages there are for cities, for childcare, for the Atlantic Accord, and for investments in all Canadians and all Nova Scotians. And it's most disingenuous to hear the Leader of the official opposition indicate that he's now prepared to vote for the original budget, which contains the Atlantic Accord, but he has indicated that he and his party and the Separatists intend to vote against the agreement that was reached, C-48, between Jack Layton, who clearly showed leadership on behalf of his party through very difficult times, and I certainly am pleased that the Prime Minister was able to reach agreement with him. At the end of the day, it is an investment that will be made that will strengthen our province, that will strengthen our country. As a recent university graduate who just recently finished paying off his student loans, I'm proud to say, I can certainly attest to the financial difficulty that our current student loan system, the financial burden it places on our students because of the high debt load that they are forced to endure. So it is certainly our hope, and especially now when we talk about this bill, I would certainly hope that the Premier or the Minister of Education would be able to stand in their place and say that they've asked the three Tory members from Nova Scotia, the MPs, to support not only the first budget but the second one as well, to make sure that Nova Scotians are insured of this money, and maybe they'll take their opportunity once I sit down to indicate that they've asked for that support. Maybe Mr. Peter MacKay's feeling better today and is going to finally put the interests of Nova Scotians first, so that Bill number 207 will actually be a bill that will hold this government accountable on this money, and that we won't have to fear that this bill will have no effect because that aspect of the budget may be voted down. So I'm pleased this bill is moving forward, and certainly look forward to any assurances that the government can give us that they've made their views known to their federal colleagues in Ottawa. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise and say a few words about this bill. First of all, as we've said in the House, I know in response to a direct question from the Leader of the official opposition, that clearly if money flowed from Ottawa that was intended to go for the benefit of post-secondary students, then it would flow there. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, one of the things I was a bit concerned about, and I spoke to the clerk the other day, was that this particular piece of legislation is not exactly consistent with that of the bill which was tabled in Ottawa. And I have been informed, because as the honourable member, I see him nodding his head, he understands that the bill in Ottawa would take precedence and because, for example, the Bill 40, C-48 in Ottawa talked about Aboriginal students, and we have not included that in this. So I was concerned about that. The other thing that I just want to draw to the members' attention is that I'm really pleased if we're going to get more money to benefit post-secondary students. But I don't want anyone to think that this is just going to be a slam dunk to do this appropriately. It's going to be a lot of work, and we're going to need some advice on how to do it. And to give you a couple of examples, the honourable member mentioned in his comments the leader of the official opposition about apprenticeship. That was not mentioned in this particular piece of legislation. We also have the community college students as well as university students, and when we're talking about grants and we're talking about reductions of tuition, for example, the tuition at Acadia, I think, is roughly about $6,500. The tuition at Nova Scotia Community College is $2,500. Do you get into a sliding scale? How do you work it? And as long as people understand that there are going to have to be some details worked out in this, assuming then that money comes, then I'm prepared, certainly prepared. We welcome any influx of money from the federal government. The other thing which I would like to enlist the support of the other two parties, and I mentioned it the other day, is that it appears that if the budget passes, and that passes in Ottawa, that the amount that Nova Scotia would gain annually would be between about $22.5 million and about 34.5, depending on how you count the students. So really what we would like, and I had mentioned this on the floor of the House the other day, we've been lobbying as a government since we've been in power to get the federal government to give the money for higher education based on a head count as opposed to the population count or per capita count. Makes a tremendous difference. And not only count the university students, but the community college students. We also have the training students who are in the apprenticeship programs. And we also have to recognize the valuable role in post-secondary education that some of the private career colleges play. And so all I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is we welcome that, and we made this commitment outside of the legislation that if we got the money, it would flow through to the students. But I just want to make sure that people understand that we are talking about a wide variety of students. There is going to have to be a process worked out. I actually, when the bill was tabled the other day, I had staff put together some preliminary figures and possible scenarios, which I have. We will have to select one of those. But the other thing is that it's critically important for us in Nova Scotia, for the members, particularly in the third party, who have their Ottawa cousins, whom they talk about all the time. Well, not cousins, whatever they are in Ottawa. I just want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I hope the honourable member from Richmond will get on the phone and call his Ottawa cousins and say, folks, if you're still in government at the end of the night because that budget passes, we want Nova Scotia's money to flow in Nova Scotia on our percentage of students, not on the population of our province.
Recognized Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition to close debate on Bill number 207. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I just note the exchange, I think, has something to do with Belinda Stronach. I'm not sure what it's about. Just want to close debate on 207.
Motion is for third reading of Bill 207. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 207, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 365 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Provincial Finance Act.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 174, the Auditor General Act?
Bill number 174, the Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to this would be for third reading, I'm sure, Mr. Speaker.
Third reading.
Third reading,
yes.
I thought so. I've been busy elsewhere. I would be pleased to I would like to thank again, for the record, Mr. Speaker, the members of the All-Party Committee that have worked with me on the selection of the new Auditor General, the Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview and the Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel. Both members, it's been a very cooperative environment. All parties are interested in making sure that we have the very best process possible to ensure that Nova Scotians have the benefit of the very best Auditor General in the future, and that serves the interest of all Nova Scotians and all members of this House. And with that, I would move third reading of the bill.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to speak for just 2 minutes here on third reading in the Auditor General Act. Mainly, I would say in my capacity as chair of the Public Accounts Committee, which in a sense is the committee of the legislature that works most closely with the Auditor General. I think we all know how important the Office of the Auditor General is to the proper functioning of government in Nova Scotia, and especially at the federal level. We see what a profound effect the Auditor General's office has had. This is the bill that's before us is a good bill. It makes 2 substantive improvements to the Office of the Auditor General, namely that it says that this House will approve the next person to be appointed. Because we have a minority government, it means that in effect the government has given up its absolute right to appoint the next Auditor General, and it also sets a term limit. Mr. Speaker, there are problems that arise when you have anybody to any position appointed for an unlimited period of time. This bill says that the next Auditor General will be appointed for 10 years, which certainly meets the national standard. I did want to rise today, Mr. Speaker, to make note of a couple of additional amendments that were recommended by our Auditor General in the Law Amendments Committee, amendments that will not be going forward. And I think it's important to put this on the public record so that when we are looking for the next Auditor General 10 years from now, people will know what happened this time. The current Auditor General appeared before the Law Amendments Committee and recommended 2 things. He said that, first of all, his remuneration should be stipulated in the Auditor General Act. Right now, the remuneration is not stipulated. It simply says it's within the control of the Government Council. There are many people, and I happen to be one of them, who believe it is not appropriate for the Auditor General's remuneration to be entirely within the control of the Cabinet. Second of all, the current Auditor General said that he believes that there should be a different process for his office's budget to be established by the House, not to be treated like just any other department, but if his office is to function adequately, he needs some assurance that there is no hint of any kind of politics or partisanship in the setting of his budget. He suggested that, in fact, his estimates be referred, for example, to the Public Accounts Committee for approval to try and give his office yet one more layer of independence from the government. I will say, without doing a dissertation on these 2 amendments, Mr. Speaker, that we were not able to achieve all-party agreement on these proposed amendments. We went into this bill having agreed that there would be no more amendments to the bill on which there was not all-party consensus. And certainly we're not interested in sacrificing the good for the perfect. And this is a good bill, Mr. Speaker, and we're pleased to support it. Thank you.
Motion is for third. The Honourable Minister of Justice would close debate, please, on Bill 174.
Appreciate the comments of my honourable friend, and I would move third reading of the bill.
Motion is for third reading of Bill 174. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 174, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 28 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Auditor General Act.
Or the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 177, the Financial Measures 2005 Act.
Bill number 177, Financial Measures 2005 Act. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise to move third reading for Bill 177. This, of course, Mr. Speaker, has and captures a number of issues from a variety of departments. But, Mr. Speaker, having said that, I'll move third reading.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 177. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 177, entitled An Act Respecting Certain Financial Measures.
Or the bill do pass, or the title is read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to all members of the House. I'm very pleased to rise and introduce a person from my community that's very dedicated to my community. He's brought a lot of business to my community. He's the CEO of the Southwest RDA, and he is the leader that brought Register.com 570 jobs to my community, Mr. Speaker, and that would be Frank Anderson. And I'd ask all members to give a warm welcome.
Certainly welcome Mr. Anderson to the gallery today and hope he enjoys the proceedings. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 179, the Self-Managed Support Care Act?
Yes. Bill number 179, Self-Managed Support Care Act. The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to say before moving this bill that there's a couple of people I would like to mention. In particular, the MLA for Annapolis, who, as mentioned before, has championed this act and moving this through. I'd also like to give thanks to all of the members of the Legislative Assembly for their support, in particular the Honourable Minister of Health for his support as well on this bill. Mr. Speaker, it comes a time when, as legislators, we can recognize a very good piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, that will benefit Nova Scotians, and I think by moving forward on this bill that we have accomplished that with this legislation, Mr. Speaker. And having said that, I would move third reading of Bill 179.
The member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm just going to take a minute, and the reason I'm going to take a minute is because I want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that has been done by my party and ourselves in bringing this issue before the legislature over a number of years. And I also want to say thank you to the member for Glace Bay for making this piece of legislation come forward. I note that the member of Glace Bay did not mention the tremendous amount of work that this individual has done over the years, but I do want to say thank you so very much. Thank you.
Order, please. Order, please. I recognize the Honourable Member for Glace Bay to close debate on Bill 179. The Honourable Member.
Not to be remiss, Mr. Speaker, but let's also mention the Honourable Member for Dartmouth North. Okay?
I wish that.
And having said that, I'd like to move closure of the debate and move third reading of Bill 179.
Motion is for third reading of Bill 179. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 179, entitled An Act Respecting Support Services for Disabled Persons in Self-Managed Care.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Would you please call Bill number 180, the Municipal Government Act?
Bill number 180, the Municipal Government Act. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to move third reading of Bill number 180, the Municipal Government Act.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 180. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 180, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 191, the Municipal Law Amendment 2005 Act?
Bill number 191, the Municipal Law Amendment 2005 Act. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased as well to move third reading of Bill number 191. I would take a second, however, to recognize the hardworking staff of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations who have worked tirelessly on this file for a year. This is an issue that government has worked on for a decade, and I believe it's the right thing to do, so pleased to move third reading.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 191. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 191, titled An Act to Amend Chapter 23 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Assessment Act, Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act, and certain related statutes.
Or the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, would you please call, Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 192, the Alexander Graham Bell Day Act?
Bill number 192. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
On behalf of the Honourable Member for Cape Breton West, I move second reading of Bill number 192.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 192. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 192, entitled An Act to Establish a Day to Recognize Alexander Graham Bell.
Or the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I keep calling him Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry about that, sir. Bill number 198, the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission Act.
Bill number 198, the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission Act. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to move third reading. This will be the first time in 50 years that this act has been amended since 1952. There's some changes that are required for people to service the traveling public and more efficiently. So, having said that, Mr. Speaker, I move third reading.
The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you. Briefly on this bill, Mr. Speaker, the bill originally, as it was presented at second reading, provided a clause that would allow Cabinet to take the profit from the MAC pass and use it for whatever purpose Cabinet thought was appropriate. That was deleted on the motion from the NDP at law amendments because we believe it's important that those particular commuters that are using that bridge on a regular basis, that are using the MAC pass, are ensuring that any profits from that program go back towards the bridges that cross the harbor and are going to be used either to improve the service, improve the infrastructure, or reduce tolls, Mr. Speaker. And as a result, we think this is a better bill and we can support it.
Recognize the Honourable Minister of Finance. Close debate on Bill number 198. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
We thank the Honourable Member for the comments, and with that, I move third reading.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 198. House ready for the question. All those in favour say aye. Contraminded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 198, entitled an act respecting the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 202, the Children and Family Services Act.
Bill number 202, Children and Family Services Act. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading of Bill number 202, the Children and Family Services Act.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to speak on Bill 202, which proposes changes to the Children and Family Services Act. These amendments would entrench open adoptions in legislation and also make necessary changes so children in the care and custody of the minister have an opportunity to be adopted if it is in their best interests. This has been quite a journey, Mr. Speaker. When the bill was first brought forward, it caused a great deal of concern with respect to the impact on birth parents and other family members of children in permanent care. We were concerned, and so were groups and individuals we consulted, that a parent who doesn't have custody but who has access could have their child literally adopted away from them with no notice or recourse. A series of discussions and meetings and further consultation followed, and I'd like to thank the Community Services staff for their help and patience as we work through each concern expressed to our caucus. One of the biggest concerns expressed to us centers on the ability of the minister to place a child in an adoptive home which would cancel any access orders. The problem is that there was no provision for family members with an access order to be notified in advance of the pending adoption placement. This would have prevented people with access to the child from exercising their rights to apply to restore their custody of the child or request an open adoption agreement and continued access following adoption. An amendment put forward by our caucus copies a provision in Newfoundland's legislation that ensures anyone with an access order is notified 30 days in advance of the adoption placement, at a point where they still have the ability to participate in the process. This means that parents, grandparents, siblings, and other people important to the child will have the opportunity to make their desires known and be part of the process. People we consulted about the proposed changes to the Act also felt the wording of the open adoption section limited open adoption agreements to parents who voluntarily give up their children, freezing out parents who lose custody of their children to the minister. We were able to clarify with staff that open adoption agreements will be available to any family member who has access to the child. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will be available to any family member who has access to a child, in addition to voluntary adoptions. Another concern we were able to resolve was the question of what happens to siblings in the event the family is separated into different adoptive homes or living arrangements. We would hope that this almost never happens and that siblings will be kept together whenever possible. Department staff listened to these concerns and responded with the assurance that siblings are covered by the wording of the open adoption provisions, and they would be considered as part of the pre-adoption procedures. Having worked closely with staff on these issues, I am satisfied that the legislation, as it is now presented for third reading, provides a better balance among the best interests of the child, the rights of biological parents and family members, and the rights of adoptive families. I feel that entering the openness agreements into the legislation, we are formalizing a process that has been taking place in an informal way for a number of years. By doing this, we are giving everyone clear rights. This is very gratifying because we have heard the concerns of grandparents' rights advocates on the issue of placement of grandchildren who are taken from their parents. While this legislation doesn't address all of the complexities of grandparents' access to grandchildren, it does give them a formal standing in this process, and that is a step forward. The important thing is this legislation is going to allow several children presently in the care of the minister to enter into stable adoptive homes. We all know